Maria, the implications of this are frankly nothing short of historic. Over 100 documents that we released on Friday really detail and provide evidence of how this treasonous conspiracy was directed by President Obama just weeks before he was due to leave office, after President Trump had already gotten elected.
So many of you have asked me to look into Tulsi Gabbard's treasonous conspiracy claim. So to help me evaluate it, I've used 6 different AI models and asked each one of those AI models to tell me the strengths and weaknesses of the argument. Then I asked those AI models to give me a final letter grade to tell me whether the conclusion that Gabbard is coming to is justified by the evidence she presents. You're going to be surprised. So let's start by taking the argument Tulsi Gabbard is making and breaking it down into digestible pieces so we understand what she's alleging and how she's coming to her conclusions. Now, the most important part here is that Tulsi Gabbard is going to make very clear that there is no evidence that Russia hacked voting machines or altered vote tallies specifically. Now, we're not talking about influence on social media or anything like that. We're just talking specifically about there is no evidence that Russia hacked voting machines or altered votes. Here is The Hill breaking it down and explaining to us exactly what she's alleging.
Now, Gabbard's key finding is this. In December of 2016, after Trump had won the presidential election, intelligence officials prepared an assessment that found that Russia did not have the capability to affect the outcome of the election, i.e. Russia could not hack the voting machines or have some power to actually change the result. That's important.
Intel officials planned a December 9th, 2016 presidential daily brief, which is always from the Intel community for the president, letting him know what's happening in the world. They planned a PDB that would say foreign adversaries, quoting here, foreign adversaries did not use cyber attacks on election infrastructure to alter the U.S. presidential election outcome. And they also plan to say, we have no evidence of cyber manipulation of election infrastructure intended to alter results.
So this is our first premise. The September 2016 intelligence community assessment found no evidence that Russia hacked voting machines or altered any vote tallies. Now, the second premise that Tulsi Gabbard has put forward is that a later assessment by the Intel community in January of 2017, before Trump took office, claimed that Russia interfered with the election to help Trump, citing things like disinformation, email hacks, and a social media op.
That was never published. Hours before it would have gone into President Obama's President's Daily Brief, it was pulled by a senior level intelligence official saying that they had to pull it because they had received new guidance. The very next day, this meeting was called, a National Security Council meeting, bring together all of the senior leaders of President Obama's cabinet, and the topic that was put forward was a sensitive matter. The tasks that came out of that meeting was coming from President Obama directing the intelligence community, then Obama's ODNI director Clapper, to produce a document, to produce an intelligence assessment that detailed not if, but how Moscow affected the outcome of the election that had already occurred, electing Donald Trump to the presidency. This document that they published in January of 2017 was the foundational groundwork that they continued to reference over and over and over again to enact this years-long coup against President Trump.
So our second premise from Tulsi is that the intelligence agency's assessment claimed that Russia did not interfere with the U.S.'s election, and that Obama manufactured a report to essentially claim that Russia tried to influence the U.S. election. Now, Tulsi has used the word treason, so I just wanted to define it under the U.S. Constitution. It's found in Article 3, Section 3, and it says, treason against the United States shall consist only of levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. Tulsi also used the word coup multiple times, and it's short for the words coup d'etat. It's a sudden, violent, or illegal seizure of power from a government. Now, from the first two premises, Tulsi then comes to a conclusion, and that conclusion is that there was a treasonous conspiracy to fabricate intelligence information and undermine the duly elected president. All right, so this is a good point just to recap everything to break down Tulsi's argument. 1, there was no hacking of any voting machines or changing of any physical votes. And the Obama administration knew that in September and December of 2016. The second premise is that the assessment said there was no Russian interference because there was no hacking into the physical voting machines. And that was January of 2017. So after Trump won, that's when Obama and them came to this new assessment that there was no Russian interference because there was no hacking into voting machines. And then finally, the overall conclusion is that President Obama and his team committed a treasonous conspiracy because they wanted to push the narrative that Russia interfered in the election to help President Trump win, and that was a lie. So now, is this argument logically valid? Do the premises lead to the conclusion? So to help us with that, I've asked multiple AIs to evaluate Tulsi Gabbard's argument. So does Tulsi Gabbard's argument have any logical flaws or logical fallacies? And ChatGPT and Grok have pointed to multiple fallacies. So first, ChatGPT says that Tulsi Gabbard is using the fallacy of false equivalence. What does that mean? Well, this is when someone wrongly treats two different things as if they were the same. ChatGPT gives us this example. If I didn't cheat on the test by stealing the answer key, then I must not have cheated at all. But what if you texted a friend the answers? That is still cheating. Essentially, just because you didn't cheat in a specific way, stealing the answer key, doesn't mean you didn't cheat at all, using some other method. So ChatGPT then applies this to Gabbard's argument. Gabbard says that because there is no evidence that Russia hacked voting machines, there must not have been any Russian interference in the election. ChatGPT then tells us why she's incorrect. See, there are different types of interference. One kind is hacking voting machines, which admittedly did not happen. The other is spreading lies online, hacking emails, or pushing propaganda, all which did happen.
Now to the new and final report tonight on what Russia did in 2016. It comes from the Republican-led Senate Intelligence Committee, and it's not good. Here's our Chief Justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas.
Tonight, the Republican-led Senate Intelligence Committee releasing its final report, declaring the 2016 Trump campaign had repeated contacts with Russian operatives. Among the new findings, the report saying Paul Manafort, Trump's campaign chairman, represented a grave counterintelligence threat, determining he gave polling information to Konstantin Kilimnik, who the committee describes as a Russian intelligence officer.
Polling data to a political campaign is a blueprint. It's a roadmap of the entire campaign. It would be a guide for them just like it would be a guide for the campaign.
Senate investigators also concerned that Manafort may have been involved in the Russian efforts to hack emails from the Democrats' 2016 presidential campaigns, emails later published by WikiLeaks. And despite President Trump's claim he didn't remember speaking to his then advisor Roger Stone about WikiLeaks, the committee saying they believe he did. The president recently commuted Stone's sentence, prompting critics to claim it was a reward for Stone's silence.
So just because one didn't happen, hacking voting machines, doesn't mean the other didn't happen. Now let's turn to Grok, because Grok also found multiple logical flaws within Tulsi Gabbard's argument and points to a straw man fallacy as being one of the most egregious. Here's a clear example of a straw man fallacy. Let's say the original argument is that we should increase funding for public schools to improve education. The straw man would be someone responding, you want to eliminate private schools and force everyone into public schools. Well, obviously, they're mischaracterizing the original argument. So here's Grok explaining why Tulsi Gabbard's argument employs the straw man fallacy. Gabbard claims Obama's team made up the whole story about Russia interfering in the election. But reports show Russia did things like hack emails, use social media to cause trouble.
And let's start with the news concerning today's Facebook announcement and how Washington is responding.
So you sort of see what they were doing was these trolls were trying to create two different accounts. One was Unite the Right, which is pro-right wing. The other is Abolish ICE, which it goes more to the left. What they want, they're not ideologically based. They just want people fighting each other. This was a point that Senator Marco Rubio pointed out to me when I interviewed him recently. Here's that sound.
They may have had a preference for Donald Trump, but I don't think they thought he was going to win. I think their primary objective was to create chaos in American politics and make sure that whoever won, and they thought it was going to be Hillary, would face a dark cloud over their head in those first 2 years, weaken us from within, weaken our resolve and our capacity to stand up to them.
And as Senator Rubio says, he thinks they accomplished that. Yeah. Regardless of who won, they were both going to be under a cloud, President Trump or Hillary Clinton. The chaos is what the Russians wanted. The chaos is what they've got.
I don't want anyone to use our tools to undermine democracy. That's not what we stand for.
Russian companies spent more than $100,000 on Facebook ads during the campaign, many of them praising Donald Trump or attacking Hillary Clinton, and others dealing with controversial issues.
She attacks the idea that they faked everything, which isn't what the evidence says, making it easier for her to argue. Now, both Grok and ChatGPT point to Republicans claiming exactly the same thing that the Obama administration claimed, that Russia did attempt to interfere in the 2016 elections, and the various ways they tried to interfere.
Let me be totally clear in saying that, and I've said this many times, I accept our intelligence community's conclusion that Russia's meddling in the 2016 election took place. Could be other people also. There's a lot of people out there.
All right, let's get to another layer of this story. Republican leaders on the Senate Intel Committee say they agree with U.S. intelligence agencies that Russia interfered in the 2016 election and that Moscow favored Donald Trump in the race. Committee Chairman Richard Burr, Republican, said in a statement yesterday he saw no reason to dispute the conclusions made by the intelligence community.
Now, we haven't even talked about the DOJ's Inspector General reporting the same exact thing, the Mueller report, which also reported Russian interference, and the Durham report. That is the hand-picked special prosecutor by the Trump administration to look into the Russian interference campaign, and they also concluded that Russia tried to interfere in the election. Okay, so what's the final grade on Tulsi Gabbard's argument of a treasonous conspiracy committed by the Obama administration back in 2016? We asked 6 different AIs to evaluate Tulsi Gabbard's argument and give us a final grade and the reasoning why they gave us that grade. And here is what each one said. Let's start with ChatGPT, which gives Tulsi Gabbard's argument a D+. It says, quote, "This argument fails because it draws a broad and serious conclusion from limited and selective interpreted evidence. It confuses different types of election interference and assumes intent without providing it, and relies on flawed logic to connect events. To be credible, the argument needs stronger evidence, clearer distinctions, and sounder reasoning." Next up is Perplexity AI, and it also gives Gabbard's argument a D grade. Quote, "Gabbard's argument is logically weak due to its reliance on selective interpretation of complex intelligence discussions, tendency to conflate distinct issues, absence of new criminal evidence, rhetorical escalation, and disregard for established investigative findings. The accusatory nature of the claim, coupled with its lack of substantive and legally actionable proof, places it close to the bottom in terms of logical strength." So now let's look at DeepSeek. This is the free Chinese AI. And what does it say about Gabbard's argument? Well, it gives it the letter grade also of a D. Why? Well, it says here strengths. The report superficially cites declassified documents, giving it the veneer of legitimacy. Here are the weaknesses. Misrepresents intelligence community's conclusions, relies on logical fallacies to construct a narrative, lacks actionable evidence of criminal intent or treason, contradicted by bipartisan multi-year investigations. DeepSeek's conclusion is that Gabbard's argument is rhetorically charged but logically unsound. It fails to meet the burden of proof for its extraordinary claims and ignores established investigative findings. A D grade reflects its reliance on distortion, omission, and politicalization over rigorous analysis. Claude AI gives Gabbard's argument the letter grade of a D-. It says, quote, "The argument fails basic standards of logical reasoning by misusing legal terminology, cherry-picking evidence while ignoring contrary findings, and making extraordinary claims without extraordinary evidence. While it raises some procedural questions worth examining, the core treason and coup allegations are not supported by the evidence presented or legal standards." So next we turn to Grok, which gives Tulsi Gabbard's argument the letter grade of a D. Here is the reason for the grade. Gabbard's argument earns a D because it has a clear main point and some emotional appeal, but is severely weakened by insufficient evidence, selective use of documents, and multiple logical fallacies. It fails to meet the standard of a strong fact-based argument, especially given the serious nature of the treason claim. Now, last but not least, we turn to Gemini, made by Google, and it gives Gabbard's argument an F. Here's what it says. Tulsi Gabbard's argument that Barack Obama or the Obama administration committed treasonous conspiracy against the United States receives an F for logical strength. The argument fundamentally misunderstands or misrepresents the legal definition of treason and conspiracy, makes unsubstantiated causal links, and rephrases previously investigated claims without providing new compelling evidence to support the severe accusations. The claims are not supported by the available information and rely on broad interpretations and implications rather than established facts and legal definitions. So all 6 AI models essentially say Tulsi Gabbard's argument is logically flawed and give it a failing grade. Now, personally, I was surprised that each one of the AI models pointed to all of these logical flaws within Tulsi's argument, and I was surprised that in unison, each one says that Tulsi Gabbard's argument essentially is nonsense. But I would like to know your opinion. Do you agree with the 6 AI models that evaluated Tulsi's argument and says that it's at best a D? Or do you think that there's more here and that the AI models aren't looking at the bigger picture? Let me know in the comment section how you feel. Let me know where you think the AI went wrong, and let me know why, if you think Tulsi Gabbard's argument has some weight, or if you agree with the AI that the argument is essentially nonsense. My name is Nate the Lawyer. Don't kill the messenger in the comment section because, again, I put this into AIs just as an exercise, and I didn't expect this result, but we are here. So, my name is Nate the Lawyer. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.